Hello, everybody. It's so nice to see so many people here today. For those of you who don't know me, I am Emma Noyce. My day job is in Hampshire County Council, but for the purpose of this session, I am here as a trustee of Libraries Connected and also the Libraries Connected trustee sponsor for the Know Your Neighbourhood project. And I'm really, really pleased to be here. I think Tessa will introduce the speakers, but I just wanted to say a couple of, and also I'm aware that some of you here today haven't been necessarily involved in the Know Your Neighbourhood project before now. So Tessa will introduce the speakers and introduce a little bit about the project. But I just wanted to say a couple of things in advance of that. Firstly, we've got a really great agenda today, some really thought-provoking items. So we've got external speakers talking about loneliness, but then we've also got examples of activity that's happening across libraries across the country, and it's really, really inspiring. I've had some early, I've heard some things about some of these projects already, and I'm really, really excited to hear more about them. I wanted to say as a board sponsor that when we went through and evaluated some of the applications, or all of the applications, in fact, it felt a little bit academic. And I have to say, when I don't know if any of you have done maths kind of evaluations where you have to read through 6 or 7 project proposals every week, it started to get a little bit, you get a bit word blind about the number of community engagement projects and things like that. And it felt like a bit of an academic exercise. And it's absolutely incredible to see those words on paper that are now transformed into active projects, and we're really in delivery now. And it's really really interesting to see different approaches that different organisations have. So that's I'm looking forward to hearing a bit about that today. I also just wanted to make the point that every single one of you on this call today is an ambassador. You are an ambassador for these projects and for the wider role that libraries, community organisations, and whatever organisation you represent, you're an ambassador for loneliness and how to support people and enable people to become less isolated. So that's quite a privileged position, and we really, as a project board, wanted to make sure that although the funding was limited to particular authorities or particular local authority areas in specific areas highlighted as particularly susceptible to loneliness, we wanted to make sure that one of the outcomes of this project, that there was a wider understanding of the barriers to engagement, loneliness as a concept, and also the things that you can do to support your residents and people who use your services to be less lonely and less isolated. And I think you've heard me say before that this is a learning exercise. So as much as it's great to hear about the things that are going incredibly well, it's also really important to hear about things that have been tried and aren't working so well, because that's also helping us learn about what to do. So I think that's all from me. I'm going to hand over to Tess. But I'm really looking forward to hear what the speakers we're going to hear from today. So Tess.
Thank you. Emma is going to share my slides. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'm Tess Blades from Libraries Connected, and I'm project managing the library element of the Know Your Neighbourhood project. So that as Emma said, there are some people here today who may not be involved in the Know Your Neighbourhood project. So I'll just do a little recap of the fund and then give an overview of the targets and outcomes of the funded library projects. The DCMS Know Your Neighbourhood project is a £29 million package of funding, and which is designed to widen participation in volunteering and tackle loneliness in 27 disadvantaged areas across England. There are 3 strands to the programme, and we're part of strand 1. So that's £5 million being delivered through the Arts Council England to arts, culture and heritage organisations. So that's via us at Libraries Connected, Creative Lives and the Association of Independent Museums. Going to move to the targets. Library services in all 27 of those identified areas have been granted up to £88,000 to deliver initiatives in their local communities. So in the proposals, we asked libraries to identify targets around volunteering and reaching people at risk of or experiencing chronic loneliness. You'll see here the total number of new volunteers from the proposals was just over 1,000. 4,703 service users with chronic loneliness or at risk of chronic loneliness are expected to be reached, and 3,893 beneficiaries in total. So this captures beneficiaries that don't fall into those two previous targets. So if they're, for instance, a festival led by volunteers, so the people attending the festival may not be volunteers or people at risk of chronic loneliness necessarily. So due to some delays in recruitment that libraries have experienced and phasing, so where project timelines included a discovery phase, for instance, to understand their community before targeting their activities, progress towards the targets has been slow to start. However, indications from library services are that they're still on track to meet their proposed targets. And as these targets have been published by DCMS, it's important to maintain that momentum and reach targets wherever possible. So I'm just going to move on to the outcomes. So these outcomes were pulled from the DCMS guidance, and this graph shows the outcomes that the library services selected in their proposals. And as you can see, the projects generally fit well with these outcomes, and that the services being provided as part of these projects are broad enough to meet most of the outcomes. It does demonstrate a slight lean towards loneliness rather than volunteering, but I wouldn't say necessarily very significant. And the majority of project proposals outlined an aim to both enable volunteering and tackle loneliness. Move on to target audiences. So this graphic shows the split of the library proposals among the groups identified as at risk of chronic loneliness by DCMS in their guidance. Again, there's a fairly even split across the target audiences. And we did, in the proposal form, encourage local knowledge of communities to identify location-specific target audiences. So you'll see some examples of that there. Older people, people seeking asylum and refugees, people aging without children, carers, including young carers or those leaving care, men aged 18 to 40, people with sensory impairment, and bereaved. So I'll just finally I thought I'd just share some highlights from the first round of reporting from the participating libraries. So firstly, working with existing and new local partners. There are lots of examples of working with local partners, which is wonderful to hear given the fund aims to strengthen and develop relationships and partnerships. We'll hear today from Cannock Chase, who've been successful in developing a new partnership with Primary Care Network. Norfolk also are working with Creative Arts East to commission artists, musicians and performers, who they're already working with on the ACE-funded Rekindle partnership. Cross-strand working, the reporting demonstrated cross-strand activity across the Know Your Neighbourhood funded organisations. For example, Barnsley Museum are working in partnership with Doncaster, who've been successful with an association of independent museums, Know Your Neighbourhood Project. So both of those projects will report to the same leadership team in Doncaster. So lessons learned can be shared across the projects. Libraries have been building on what's already available as part of their service. So Norfolk will be expanding on their stay and play parenting sessions, job clubs and bereavement cafes, and extending the warm hubs provision was identified in a number of proposals, including Knowsley, Sunderland, Thameside, Torridge, and more. And finally, upskilling of library staff and volunteers has come through in the reporting as well. So, for example, training around working with older communities, Middlesbrough offering age-friendly training, training on community engagement to help the frontline teams better understand their customers' needs, trauma-informed services, audience development and activity provision in Blackpool, and a few libraries, including Rochdale, offering volunteer training packages. So this has been a quick run through of some of the elements pulled out from reporting, and we are lucky enough to hear from 3 of the Know Your Neighbourhood libraries today, as they'll be sharing an update on their projects, and a more detailed breakdown and analysis of what kinds of activities have been funded will be produced in May by the Strand 1 Evaluators, ERS, so we'll be able to share these results at a future knowledge sharing event. So I'm going to hand over now to our first speaker, Nicola Curry. She's a researcher at the University of Edinburgh who's been investigating the relationship between fiction reading and well-being. She's about to start a placement at Libraries Connected, so we thought this might be a good opportunity to introduce her and her work. Over to you, Nicola.
Thank you, Tess. Sorry, just my slides have disappeared. Can everybody see those? Right, okay, let's try again. Okay.
Yeah,
I can see slides.
Super, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to come along today and to attend this event and to talk about some of the work that we've been doing at Edinburgh. So as Tess says, I'm Nicola Curry. I'm a researcher at the University of Edinburgh, and we've been doing some work focusing on reading and wellbeing across the lifespan, so focusing on fiction reading and how it can support wellbeing in different age groups. So all I wanted to do today was just come along and share some of the work that we've been doing in case there might be parallels with any of the work that you're doing in library settings. So I'll give a very brief insight into the research background and some of our early results. And then I'll talk a little bit about the knowledge exchange placement that we have funding for, which is running from sort of March to July. And it's focusing more sort of on reading and wellbeing in older adults, but actually because we've got these other age groups as well, again, if you can see parallels there, it would be great to learn more about that. So I'll talk a bit about that as well. So just to give a bit of research context to the work that we've been doing, there are a number of large quantitative studies that indicate this positive relationship between reading and wellbeing, and these come from different international contexts as well. We also know from the qualitative data that really supports this wide range of rich and diverse positive effects that we know that we can get from reading. But we do lack a little bit of sort of in-depth understanding about the complexities of this relationship and whether as well there are similarities and differences in how reading might support wellbeing across the lifespan. So for example, does it work in a different way to support children's wellbeing as opposed to adults perhaps? In addition to this, we know that wellbeing is a very sort of subjective and complex concept, so it means different things to different people. And also from a research point of view, researchers have defined it in different ways or measured it in different ways. So we wanted to be quite clear about how we're going to measure wellbeing and keep it quite broad if possible, but also give our participants the opportunity to talk about how reading personally supports their own wellbeing from their own perspective. So for this research, we had, it's a qualitative project funded by the Live Trust. And as I say, it's focusing on the fiction side of things and thinking about wellbeing from the perspective of readers. We've got 4 age groups, so children aged 9 to 11, young people aged 15 to 17, adults aged 30 to 50, and older adults aged 65 and older. And we had these 3 different wellbeing concepts. So the positive emotions that you might get from reading, the connection experiences, so whether that be connection through the actual with the book itself and the characters, but also connection experiences you might have through reading as part of organised activities, or it's sort of interactions in the home, perhaps an informal discussion about books. And then finally, personal growth, so thinking about what we might learn about ourselves, about others, about the world through reading fiction. So to do this, we had semi-structured interviews where we designed questions to tap into these different areas of wellbeing, and then we've used thematic analysis to explore the interviews and pull out the key themes there. And this has been in collaboration with our external partners at Scottish Book Trust, National Literacy Trust and UCL. So how might fiction reading support these different aspects of wellbeing that we're interested in? Well, of course, we know that there's this large range of emotions that you might get from reading, dependent on the type of book you're reading and dependent on your own experiences. So happiness, excitement, nostalgia, relaxation, comfort, sadness. I could continue talking about a huge range of emotions there. But we were quite interested in trying to understand better how reading might also be a positive, rewarding experience, even when the content that you're reading about is sad or tense. And also how our mood might interact with our reading. So does our mood influence our book choices on a particular day? And are there differences in there across the age groups perhaps with that? Or do we just stick with a particular book once we've started reading it? In terms of connection, we know that reading has the potential to perhaps reduce feelings of loneliness via connection with characters in the books. And there's discussion of sort of social surrogacy in the research literature. And then I'm really looking forward today to hearing about all the different ways that reading might also help to support social connection on our everyday lives as well, through whether it be through organised activities or whether it be through more sort of informal means as well. And then finally, personal growth. Reading can offer us opportunities for reflection on our own experiences. If we're reading about something that we've experienced ourselves, we can gain perhaps a different perspective on that. But it can also help us to develop our empathy and perspective-taking skills and learn about the lives of others. And we were really interested in Wells understanding this unique interaction between a book, an individual and their life experience, and how sort of reading might sort of provide an individualised support for wellbeing. So just to give a very brief insight into some of our results. So I've got the 4 different age groups in here, sort of colour-coded, with the children in the orange, the young people in the blue, the adults in the yellow, and the older adults in the green. And I'll just dip into some of this data very briefly today, just to give some insight into the types of things we're hearing. And I think a lot of these things will be very familiar to you and be things that you hear from readers in your own library settings. So for the first section, we were talking about positive emotions and how reading fiction makes readers feel, and also how their mood interacts with fiction reading. So starting with the children on the left-hand side of the screen there, for them there was lots of discussion about the magic of reading, the excitement, the thrill, the escapism, and that was wonderful to hear. For the young people, we also have this element of escapism, but in addition to that, there was sort of elements of comfort and nostalgia coming through there as well. So perhaps reading books that they'd maybe read with a parent when they were younger, and then they'd gone back to as a teenager and reread those books again and had that sort of comfort, nostalgia feeling from those. With the adults and the older adults, there was a huge range of different emotions dependent upon the books they wanted to talk to us about. But I wanted to pull out one particular example here from one of our adults there in the centre of the screen, who was talking about fiction, how fiction provided a safe space to kind of play with emotions that they didn't necessarily perhaps feel comfortable expressing in everyday life. And we felt that was particularly powerful. For the older adults, in the bottom of the corner of the screen there, we had lots of discussion of empathy and understanding the lives of others, but also I feel that there was a lot of discussion as well about how books had a particular impact but stayed with you. And so readers would talk about how they maybe read a book when they were a teenager or a young adult, and the influence of that book had stayed with them not just for weeks or months but for years. And again, a really powerful effect of some of these books that they were reading. I've picked a quote from the children here just on the right hand side of the screen, but all of our age groups were asked about how their mood might or may not interact with their fiction choices and their fiction reading. But in this particular case, the child was talking about sort of almost matching the book to their mood in a way. But we have heard other participants who talked about how they used books to enhance their mood. And then for others, it would be simply that if they were reading a particular book, they stuck with that book. So we had different sort of reader patterns there in the data. In terms of connection, so we were focusing on how the individual act of reading might promote feelings of connection with the books and their characters, but also how reading might sort of help to encourage interaction with others as well. So for the young children thinking about interacting with the book itself, they were very much, they did really connect strongly with some of the characters that they read about. And I think one of the things that was particularly important is being able to recognise aspects or elements of their own life or themselves in the books that they were reading. For the young people, I think, again, there was really lots of discussion about connecting with particular characters, but also learning from their characters as well. So in the blue quote on the screen here from the young person, they were talking about how this character had taught them that there's no pressure to be perfect in life. You don't have to be. And again, we felt that was an extremely powerful thing to be able to take away from a fiction book. For the adults and the older adults, again, lots of discussion of connection with particular characters, but also like in the yellow quote there on the screen from one of our adults, just they really enjoyed spending time with some of these characters. They would go back to particular books because they knew what to expect from these characters. They would often look for book series that had the same characters in them again, so that they kind of had that comfort and that sort of enjoyment of spending time with those characters. But there wasn't just connection with the characters, there was also connection with the books themselves. Sometimes this was through a particular author that somebody sort of felt a connection through, they enjoyed their books, but also setting and location did come up quite a lot. And one thing that was particularly important with that was that if a setting or a location had been used in a particular book, it was important that, as in the older adult quote at the top of the screen here, it's important that the facts and the things they said about, the authors said about that particular setting were correct, otherwise it could kind of have the opposite effect. But I think being able to connect with a location or a setting was particularly important for some of our readers, definitely. And then finally, I've got a quote from an older adult in the bottom corner of the screen there, talking about enjoying spending time with their grandchildren through reading. And we had lots of discussion about different activities that our adults and older adults in particular took part in as part of their reading life, if you will. One thing that did come through quite strongly was this interaction with other members of the family through reading, and perhaps through younger generations, having that sort of shared knowledge through reading there came across strongly as well. And so finally, in terms of personal growth, so what can readers learn about reading themselves from reading fiction, about others and about the world? And there are so many different things I could talk about here. And this was such an interesting one because I think our interviewees often felt they hadn't really reflected on what they might learn about themselves necessarily. They might have reflected about what they might have learned about others, but not necessarily about themselves. So starting with the children here, they talked a little bit about how sort of fiction reading helped them to process and understand things that were happening to people in their own lives, sort of immediately around them, so their friends and their family. For the young people, this extended out a little bit further to, I should mention that empathy came across in all age groups, but the young people did in particular talk about empathy and understanding others better. And just as this person says here in the blue quote at the bottom of the screen, they felt more understanding of the world through reading fiction. For the adults and the older adults, again, discussion of empathy and perspective taking was really strong, but also developing sort of skills in terms of active listening and being able to respond better in situations. So if they'd read about perhaps a difficult situation that a character had encountered, it gave them a little bit of insight into that so that they felt more prepared when coming across these things in their everyday life. And then, finally, at the bottom of the screen here, for the older adults, one of the things that came through was sort of an insight into experiences that they hadn't had in their own lives and they might never get the opportunity to have, but they felt as though reading again was giving them those opportunities. So that's a very brief insight into some of our data, and we will be producing academic papers from each of the age groups that go into much more detail than I've given here today. But just to talk a little bit about the knowledge exchange placement that we have, so this is a fantastic opportunity of working sort of for 5 months, 2 days a week, March to July. We're interested in understanding more about how reading and library settings can help to support sort of connection in older adults. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, we do have these other age groups as well. So if you can see parallels with your own work in the other age groups, we'd be really interested to learn more about that as well. We can, of course, share much more detail about the findings from our Reading and Wellbeing project as part of this placement. From our side of things, we can provide the in-depth insight into how the individual acts of fiction reading can support wellbeing. But we would be really interested to learn more, and that's why I'm sort of keen to listen to the talk today about all of the different activities that can go on in library settings to support wellbeing from the other side of things as well. We're of course putting together academic papers, literature reviews, we can produce summary reports, talks, co-design resources. I could carry out library visits if that would be of interest. And if there's anything that you can see that might be relevant to any of the projects that you're doing in terms of advocacy or development of new activities or projects in the future, please feel free to get in touch. And as I say, I'm really excited to hear about the projects today as part of Know Your Neighbourhood. And again, if you can see parallels there, that would be fantastic. So we're currently in the planning stages, but yeah, thank you very much for having me along today. And if you would like to know more, or if you can see links with the work that you're doing, please feel free to contact me. My email address is just there on the screen, and I've got a link there to the project webpage as well if you'd like to know more about the project. So thank you very much. Just in there.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Nicola. And I'm sure that resonates with lots of people here, and people will be keen to hear about your findings. And yeah, we look forward to working with you more.
Thank you, Tess.
So next up we have Jools Morgan-Jones from Blackpool Libraries. So I was fortunate to meet Jools when I was visiting Blackpool Libraries late last year, and I was just super impressed with her knowledge of reaching target groups and how libraries work to alleviate loneliness and social isolation. So we've invited her along to talk about her dissertation topic and share her findings. Hi, Jools.
Hi, thank you very much for this opportunity. That's lovely of you. Bear with me 2 seconds while I get the tech to work. And we should be. Okay, she says confidently. Come on, there we go. Right. Okay. When I wrote the dissertation this presentation is based upon back in 2019, none of us could have known how up close and personal we were going to get with the effects of loneliness just over a year later. Until a few years ago, most of us would have assumed that only the elderly or those retired from the workplace and those limited by mobility or health issues were subject to feelings of loneliness. The events of 2020 demonstrated to us all very clearly that this was not the case. And since then, we paid more attention to the effects of isolation and loneliness, basically because we all know now exactly how it feels. A lot of work studying the effects of loneliness had been done way before the pandemic, though. And as I went through some of this research, it made me realise what libraries were already doing to alleviate loneliness in the communities they serve. The human animal is a tribal creature, and for good reason, really. When you look at us in comparison with other top predators, we're not up to much. We can't run very quickly, our teeth aren't exactly fearsome, and our sense of smell is just woeful. So without other tribal members to keep an eye out for saber-toothed tigers and the like, early hominids wouldn't have lasted very long at all. We might think we've evolved way beyond that now, and in some ways we have, but our amygdala, the fear centre in our brains, knows only too well how vulnerable we are. If we find ourselves alone, then our amygdala switches on our anxiety, which starts pumping out cortisol and adrenaline from our brains so that we're ready to run or fight as soon as the need arises. Very few of us are at risk from saber-toothed tigers these days, but those stress chemicals still have a deleterious effect on our bodies. Our immune system sees them as invaders, viruses to be fought off, so it does what it always does in that situation. It causes inflammation. Now, that's not to say that we're going to blow up like the Hulk, but this inflammation affects every cell in our bodies as they swell up in an attempt to fight off the perceived invaders and stop them piercing the cell walls. That makes it difficult for all the major organs in our bodies to function as they should. Our hearts have to work harder to pump blood around inflamed veins. Our lungs can't perform efficient gaseous exchange. Our digestive system can't process nutrients and waste properly. And while that might be manageable for a quick burst of activity, the long-term effects of having to deal with these chemicals coursing through our bodies can and does affect our mental and physical health. Loneliness and the stress of it makes us 29% more likely to have a heart attack, 32% more likely to have a stroke, and 50% more likely to develop dementia. It can spark depression, which has us turning to bad habits such as eating and drinking poorly or smoking. In short, loneliness can curtail our lifespan by 26%. When I started looking for research around how libraries help to alleviate loneliness, I expected there to be a wealth of studies and papers on the subject because, as all of us who work in public libraries know, we are, for many in our communities, their only conversation in a day, the only people to call them by name. For an unfortunate but significant number of them, when the library closes over the festive period, we are their last happy Christmas and their first happy New Year, because they will speak to nobody in between. However, despite my searching, I could find nothing on the subject at all. It seemed that although it was common knowledge in the public library world that we did it, it was seen as something so ordinary as to be unworthy of mention. Clearly, I would need to conduct my own empirical research instead. I was fortunate enough to have the cooperation of Denbighshire Libraries and Blackpool Libraries for access to their members for this. And for balance, I decided to include input from an external group too. Blackpool has a large homeless community, many of whom visit library buildings, but who are not necessarily registered library members. I approached the Salvation Army's Bridge project, where many homeless people go for basic amenities, food and support, and was given permission to talk informally with their members about their use of the libraries in town. We're very good in public libraries at gathering quantitative data. We can produce statistics on borrowing rates, library visits, the average length of time the average member spends in a library, etc., and make pretty graphs and charts to demonstrate these things. Quantitative data has its place in delivering a service, of course, but it only gives you one part of the story. It can't tell you about people's lived experiences. Yes, Mr. Jones visited the library, was there for 20 minutes and borrowed 3 books. But what happened while he was in there? Did he borrow a book? Did he speak to the staff? Did they help him to find a book to help him learn to play the ukulele? Did that newfound hobby then introduce Mr. Jones to a whole new circle of friends, which banished his loneliness, improved his well-being, and gave him a new lease of life? We can't find that out from door count machines or running reports off the library management system. The only way to get that knowledge is to talk to him. Qualitative data collection allows us to investigate emotive issues. Using a narrative approach to data collection allows us to represent library members as people rather than statistics, and to see the humanity in their interaction with the service. But it's not an easy thing to do. Libraries Connected and the University of East Anglia have recently collaborated to develop something called the Evolves tool, an exciting new concept whereby gathering and processing qualitative data can become easier and more reportable for us all. I had to use written survey forms, phone interviews, and in-person interviews for my research, and the results were fascinating. It demonstrated that the library members felt connected to the community via the library, even when they couldn't visit the buildings. This applied not only to at-home library participants, but to participants whose working hours or deteriorating health prevented them from getting to the library, but who used the e-books and the e-audio books instead. Non-members used the libraries as refuge and for acceptance too. One young homeless man was trying to beat alcoholism, but was being hampered by other homeless people who were plying him with alcohol out on the streets. The library's no alcohol policy meant that he could use the library as a place to gain a measure of peace during the day and read to pass the time. A young mixed-race couple found acceptance in the library when they'd left their hometown because of family disapproval of their relationship. They came to Central Library every day to keep warm and to read books, and still visited regularly after they'd found somewhere to live because, as the young lady said, the library accepts everyone, doesn't it? Doesn't matter what race you are. In both of these examples, the library helped people to combat a facet of loneliness which stemmed not from isolation, but from being psychologically separate from those around them. Libraries have become Ray Oldenburg's third place, which he wrote about in his 1989 book, Great Good Places. Public places on neutral ground where people can gather and interact, and which allow them to put aside their concerns and simply enjoy the company and conversation around them. It's one of the only spaces in any community where people can encounter those they share their streets with without having to pay to get in, buy something to justify being there, or ascribe to any kind of spiritual belief. Libraries are accessible, safe spaces which welcome all demographics. Some libraries refer to the people using them as customers. I disagree wholeheartedly with this description. A public library is not a shop. There is no financial transaction going on here. You join a library. You belong to it. And then by doing so, you become a member of an already made community of people, all there for the same purpose as you, with whom you immediately have something in common. Public libraries offer universal access to the resources, but they offer something else as well. They give us access to our fellow citizens. The things we see as being ordinary in public libraries have a profound effect on the lives of our members. We allow people to mix with others in their community just by being in the building at the same time. We facilitate persistent encounter, seeing someone often, purely by dint of the library borrowing mechanism. If you stand next to someone at the shelves or by the issue desk in the library when you're borrowing your books, then there's a good chance you'll see that same person again when you bring your books back, because you'll both have the same due date. Next time, you might say hello, or you might say hello if you see them in the supermarket or on the street, and you'll feel safe to do so because you know them from your mutual library use. Public libraries encourage groups to meet in their buildings. Reading groups, digital literacy groups, rhyme time groups, etc. These groups bring strangers together. One of my research participants from Denbighshire is a single parent who came to my round time session in Prestatyn Library when their baby was 2 weeks old. Over a few weeks, they made friends with other parents in the group. They formed a friendship group who've become like an extended family to each other. They holiday together. Their children go to the same schools, and they regularly meet up for reading dates at the library. Without that group in the library to bring them together, this group of people might never have met each other. And all that social interaction for the children as well as the adults over the last 13 years might never have taken place. Books are a major part of the library offer, of course, and reading has been shown to have incredibly beneficial effects on our emotional state. Half of my research participants had used reading as a distraction from loneliness and anxiety, getting absorbed in the text and leaving their concerns behind them for a while. Reading teaches us empathy and allows for theory of mind. We can inhabit the persona of the characters and be allowed to experience their thoughts and emotions in a way that we never could in conversation with a real person, because it would be too intimate. Reading has also been shown to reduce prejudice. A recent study using students in Italy and in the UK demonstrated that after reading the Harry Potter books, their levels of learned prejudice had significantly decreased, which the researchers found to be as a result of the main character interacting favourably with stigmatised groups in the story. A 2014 DCMS report put a financial value on the well-being impact of public libraries per capita population in the UK, which at the time was just over £1,300. Not quite sure how they did it because the report didn't explain it very clearly. But if we take that figure and run it through the Bank of England's inflation calculator, and then multiply that by the current population of the UK, which is 67.33 million, in case you were wondering, we arrive at a figure of over £120 billion. Reducing loneliness and improving community cohesion are founded on connection and a sense of belonging, both of which are facilitated by public libraries. This was borne out by my dissertation research project, and I'm confident will be agreed with by every public library person out there. We need to start seeing the immense effects our ordinary things have in our communities, and qualitative research on the human impact of our service has to be a priority so that it can be made known. Public libraries wage a discreet but constant battle against loneliness and social disconnection in the communities, because they are in their communities and of their communities, and are entrenched in the altruism which first built these bastions of equality in our society. We ourselves are embattled by financial cuts and enforced closures, which cut people off not only from literacy, but tragically, from each other. Last year, the total funding for public libraries in England was £652 million. That's 0.529% of just the well-being effects of public libraries. If we can do all that we do on less than 1% of our well-being total, imagine what we could achieve if we were funded in line with our output. The Know Your Neighbourhood funding gives us the opportunity to demonstrate to the DCMS what we could do with better resources and how much more benefit we could bring to the communities we serve. And we have to be more vocal about our successes, not just with the DCMS, but with the authorities we work for, with the MPs in our respective areas, with the media, and with the public we serve every day. We stopped shushing in public libraries decades ago. Time has come to start shouting. Thank you. If anybody wants to ask me anything, do please get in touch.
Oh, it's lovely. Thanks, Jools. Such a thought-provoking presentation. And yeah, the Know Your Neighbourhood project particularly is a space for testing new ideas and learning from them. They don't have to all be successful, but just testing those new ideas in this space. Thank you, Jools. Great. We're going to move on now to the first of our case studies. So we have Kerry Hutchins from Staffordshire Libraries talking about the Know Your Neighbourhood funded activity that's been taking place in Cannock Chase. Hi, Kerry.
Hello. I'll just share my screen. I just apologise to people. I've got a terrible cold, so if I start coughing. Has that worked?
It has. If you just want to put it on presentation mode, then it will go full screen.
Okay. Oh, bear with me. Right, I've got it on presentation mode on mine, but
It's okay, we can see it. So yeah, hopefully everyone else can as well.
okay, I've pressed presentation mode, but I'm not quite sure. Shall I just carry on?
Yes, yeah, I can see that clearly. So
okay,
right.
Okay, so I'm Kerry Hutchings. I'm the Libraries Development Manager for Staffordshire Libraries, and I just want to talk you through today about the Cannock Chase Know Your Neighbourhood Project. So I'll do a little introduction to Staffordshire Libraries and then move on to what we're doing in Cannock Chase. So Staffordshire Libraries, we are based in Staffordshire, but we don't cover the Stoke-on-Trent area. We cover the rest of Staffordshire, and we have 43 static libraries. 16 of which are county council managed and 27 are community managed, and the Know Your Neighbourhood project is taking place in some of our community managed libraries, and within those libraries they're managed by partners, run by volunteers, but supported by the library service through professional support, and we continue to maintain the buildings and the book stock. We've got 2 mobile libraries, 7 prison libraries, and in 22-23 we have really started to recover from COVID. So we've had almost 1.7 million people have started visiting our libraries again. Almost 1.6 thousand books, million books were borrowed, and 28,000 people joined our libraries. But again, that is just the transactional data and not what is really taking place in our libraries, and the Know Your Neighbourhood project is a really great way of highlighting some of that activity that is starting to take place. So why Cannock Chase? And as a person who is born and bred.
Kerry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, it's not actually moving on. So
oh, right.
Is it helpful if I share for you and then you just let
me
know when you're on?
Yeah. That would be great. Thank you. Sorry.
No, don't worry.
Okay, there we go. So why Cannock Chase? So I'm born and bred in Cannock Chase, and I still live here. So my answer would be why not? Why not Cannock Chase? But the reason why Cannock Chase has been chosen is that we've got 100,000 residents in Cannock Chase, and of that amount, 21% of the children that live in our area live in poverty, and the ageing population, we've got 22% of those residents are living in poverty as well. We've got a high level, one of the highest in the country, level of fuel poverty in our area, and we've got 22% of children aged 16 plus have got no qualifications. So we've got some real issues that take place within our area. We've got the largest proportion in Staffordshire of unpaid carers, and one of the most distressing as well figures is that 73% of the population, so 73% of that 100,000 people have got are overweight or obese or have health issues, which means that we've got a population that are struggling both financially and with their health, and that leads to loneliness, that leads to that isolation, that leads to people feeling that they can't be, don't want to be part of their area. So when we looked you can move on to the next slide. When we looked at the libraries within that area, we tried to choose, we've got 6 libraries within Cannock Chase, and we tried to choose 3 libraries that would cover the broadest area, but also within those targeted areas with those problems. So we chose Brereton Library, which is a community managed library, and is the partner that runs that library is the Rotary Club. We chose Cannock Library, which is a county council managed library and used to be one of the district libraries, but is based within Cannock Town Centre, which has been lucky enough to receive Levelling Up funding. but we are in that point where we are now in the process of, there's a lot of compulsory purchase orders going on in the town, so the town has become a little bit of a wasteland. There's not a lot of people visiting the town, not a lot of people going in while that work's progressing, and so that's leading to the library being less used as before and more cutting off that isolation for groups. And then we chose Heath Hayes Library, which is managed by the NHS partnership. They're one of our partners that run that library. So we decided to do a broad spread across those 3 libraries to put our project in. So if you could move to the next slide. And I haven't shared the whole demographics for these, but they're all got very much the same picture: health inequality, high levels of deprivation, high levels of fuel poverty, which is really impacting on people coming into the library to use our libraries. And we've also got a deficit on an ageing population compared with a young population. So we've got less children being born in those areas, but we've got a rising ageing population, which is going to impact on how people use our services in the area. So next slide. But we're also, those slides have dwelled on the poverty of the area, but we're also very rich. We're very nature rich in Cannock Chase. So Cannock Chase is designated an area of outstanding natural beauty, and everybody who comes from Cannock Chase is very proud of our area. It's it's one of the smallest AONBs in the country. It's only 24 square miles, but it wraps around us like a beautiful nature cloak. And at any time you can go, I can walk out of my street now, within 10 minutes I'm on the chase. I can see the deers, I can see all the animals. And ironically, sorry about this, my cold is catching up with me. Ironically, the AONBs were created within a year of the NHS being created, with the purpose that people could use those spaces to supplement their well-being. But as you can see from the previous slides, we have 75% obesity rate in Cannock Chase. And so that well-being message isn't coming across anymore. People aren't using our green spaces in the way that they should. They're not using the services and facilities in the way that they were originally designated. So if you want to move to the next slide. So what we decided to call our project was Neighbourhood Connections. What we want to do is get people to make those connections with their local communities, with their libraries, with their services, with their spaces, to start reinvigorating people within their communities. So what we've done so far is we decided collectively as a group that we would spend a lot of our Know Your Neighbourhood funding on recruiting a coordinator. So sorry about this, I hate winter viruses. We would use a majority of our money to recruit a coordinator. And one of the reasons is that capacity. We would have struggled to deliver the project across Cannock Chase without that support. Also as well, in the past, we've been really lucky to have funding projects, and we hope in the future we'll be lucky to have funding projects that deliver big projects. But what we've discovered is that once the funding ends, we struggle to continue with some of the projects because they have been relied heavily on the money. So what we decided to do was that we would seed fund our libraries with a smaller amount of money, and that would make it more sustainable across the project. So our coordinator it's taken a while to recruit, and this is one of the learning curves that libraries, we sit within the local authority. So obviously we had to follow all of the rules, and because the Know Your Neighbourhood coordinator was a brand new role, we had to go through job evaluation. We had to do all of those things so that we were doing the right thing, but that did take the time, and we hadn't factored in that time at the very beginning. I was quite naive. I just thought, oh, we'll get a coordinator, we'll go with it. So that has delayed the project a little bit, but we've got an excellent coordinator and they've begun their role now. And they're going out into the community, they're meeting with groups, they're doing the things that we couldn't have done as a library service. A lot of that coordinator role is sitting down and talking with people, chatting with them, discussing what they want, what do they want from their libraries. But so that we could get the project moving, we have seed funded the 3 libraries, and they've used that money to buy jigsaws, games, craft materials, just to get things up off the ground. And what we've noticed, because of that fuel poverty across Cannock Chase, our libraries are being used as those warm spaces. That's quite difficult for people because they're spending all day lingering in our libraries. We're not calling it lingering, but they feel like they're lingering. So we wanted to give them things to do, so they didn't feel like they were lingering, because they're not. That's what our libraries are all about. We want people to come in at 9 o'clock in the morning and stay till the end of the day. That is what it's all about. So we've got activity tables set up in those buildings where people can come and sit and do their jigsaws, and it's lovely because you go in and you can see them being completed day on day, and they're starting to come together. And I don't want to be tempted to be the one that puts the last piece in. That's for somebody else to do. But it's really lovely to see. And then what we've also done is, bearing in mind the health inequalities, is we decided with this project, how do we market it? There's no point just banking up a poster in a local library. You're preaching to the choir. Those people are already using us. We need to go out to where those people are. Now, it doesn't matter, well, I suppose it does in a little way, but most people, if they're suffering, if they're living with loneliness, if they're not going out, if they're isolated, will still usually seek medical advice. They will still probably go to their doctors. And so we thought, let's try and work with our primary care network so that we can get the message out to people. So we've partnered up with another partner, the Inspiring Healthy Lifestyles, who deliver the health harm for Cannock Chase District Council. And they have some Know Your Neighbourhood funding called Treasured Times. What they're doing is highlighting all the things that are going on in the local area. So we've partnered with them, and I'm so sorry about this cough. We've partnered with them, and what we've done is created a video of all the great things that take place in Cannock Chase, across our libraries, across other buildings, theatres. And we're putting that into the primary care network, so it will be shown on all the TV screens in all the doctors' surgeries that have signed up. We're also working with them that once we've got our events and activity schedules, that they will go out on text message alerts to patients that have signed up. So it will be highlighting that to patients, and we're hoping that will, well, we know that will be a much wider audience. I know my doctor's got about 7,500, I'm terrible with numbers, 7,500 patients that have signed up to a text message. That's just one doctor's. So hoping we can at least get an alert out to almost all people across Cannock Chase about our events and activities by tapping into that primary care network. Next slide, please. We've also created some very simple marketing material, which will be updated when we're more online, because we want to see our community represented on their knock stop photos. But at the moment we've pulled this together, and this is just to get so people are aware and so can sign up for volunteering across their libraries. And we've asked people if they want to get involved in social activity and sharing kindness, because that's what the Know Your Neighbourhood Project is all about. It's getting involved in some social activities, and it's just sharing a bit of kindness, some smiles, and building up those connections with people. So we've put these into all of our libraries, and we've started to get some returns on them, so we're quite excited about where that's going. Next slide. And finally, what's next for our Know Your Neighbourhood project as we as we get started. Well, the biggest thing is saying yes. Having the seed funding for our libraries means we can say yes to things. So Cannock Chase borders with the West Midlands. And while our demographic is very much, we're a very white community, we have started to see people moving in from other communities. And at one of our places of welcome groups, we've got a gentleman who said, can we celebrate Diwali this year? No, usually that we would have not been able to, because we would have said, well, we haven't got the funding for the licenses for music, we haven't got any money for decorations. We would have really struggled, and we would have wanted to say yes, but we wouldn't have been able to. But this year we've been able to say yes. Yes, we're going to celebrate Diwali in Cannock Library. We're going to get the group together and we're going to celebrate it. And the Place of the Welcome group are really excited. They're really excited about being able to do these things, and that's what's really lovely. Is that through this funding we're able to say yes to people. So that's just a little snapshot of where we are with the Know Your Neighbourhood project in Cannock Chase. And I'm so sorry about my terrible cough.
Oh, thank you for battling through and for giving us that overview, Kerry. And I can, hopefully you can go and get some rest now. But yeah, it was a lovely demonstration of like the power of partnerships across Know Your Neighbourhood funding, but also just across the community in general, and that being able to reach those new audiences. So thank you. And that sort of sustainability of next steps post the funding, that's an important thing to kind of keep in your mind. And so the upskilling of staff is a great example of kind of having that sort of thoughts about what's going to happen at the end of the funding. So next up we have Diane Fleet, who's going to be giving us an update on the activity in Middlesbrough around seniors connected through age-friendly libraries.
Oh, hi Tessa, thanks so much for inviting us along today. I've got to start with an apology in that my colleague and co-speaker is very poorly today, so can't make it. So we're going to muddle along as best as we can. And my colleague Andrew's just going to share his screen now so we can talk you through our presentation. Our project is called Seniors Connected, so I'll just wait for it to come through. There we go. Seniors connected through age-friendly libraries. I mean, the reason behind our project is it's very much a partnership project with public health. We chose particularly to work on alleviating chronic loneliness in older people. Middlesbrough's got a growing older population with extremely high rates of loneliness, deprivation and health issues, with a lower life expectancies than the national average. And from experience with working with other partners, public health identified that aspects of loneliness may also be related to bereavement, sensory loss, caring responsibilities, living with dementia, sexual orientation and ageing without children. And also in Middlesbrough, 42% of our people aged 65 and over live in single person households. And although that's not necessarily an indicator of loneliness, someone who is widowed is said to be 5.2 times more likely to be lonely compared to somebody living with others. And we were really lucky in Middlesbrough to have previous research as evidence from what was the Ageing Better Middlesbrough project. They produced a report learning about loneliness, and that highlighted about the importance of co-design when seeking to empower lonely people over 50, especially where chronic loneliness is an issue. And we wanted to inspire older people to get involved at every level, but also to find joy in the company of others. So the next slide talks about what we aim to do. We wanted to bring our hardest to reach older population groups together to celebrate contributions, promote healthy ageing and change those negative attitudes to ageing. And we're going to work with partners to deliver activities and events aimed at building confidence, social interaction, and well-being, and tackle chronic loneliness. This would really include keeping people active, developing social opportunities and introducing people to new experiences, really. And also, we wanted to connect older people to volunteering opportunities and engage older people in activities within our libraries and hubs. So we had this great plan of how we'd like to achieve this. Again, as many of the other projects, we were going to employ a coordinator with experience of working with older people. And again, capacity is an issue, so we did need that coordinator to undertake this work for us. Co-design would be at the heart of what we did. An activity would be predominantly running from our libraries and community hubs, but some other venues as well. We would keep activities as accessible as possible. And again, there was that element of keeping people active and social opportunities and new experiences. And also we wanted to support older people to realise and experience the value of technology so that they could stay connected to family and friends. And we wanted to look at sort of ad hoc and dip in and out voluntary activity. So I suppose you would call it micro volunteering. So for those who've not volunteered before, it's that little introduction to volunteering. Might be just to volunteer at one event for those who were anxious about committing or had never volunteered before, who simply weren't able to. So we thought this might be a better fit for old people. So what we've done so far, we were lucky enough to be able to second a coordinator with a wealth of experience working with older people. So we were actually able to hit the ground running really quickly. Unfortunately, at the end of December, she got another permanent job, which left us with a bit of a pause in the project. So at the moment, we are trying to secure another secondment. So we've had to pause a little bit, but we are still planning things in the background. It has been quite challenging as we're undergoing a major service review, and also our central library is being refurbished. So, but we are keeping going. It's a very multifaceted project, so we wanted to highlight some of the work we've done so far, really, just to share with you today. My favourite so far, and I know we're only at the early stages of the project, but has to be our Residents in Bloom event. It was for care home residents, families and carers, and care home staff actually, and it was held at our My Place hub. It was supported by local community and charitable groups, so they delivered workshops including mindfulness, crafts, local history walk, but by far the most popular was music and singing. We were actually oversubscribed, so we had 75 care home residents come with family members, and we collected feedback on the day, but we also followed it up with care home conversations with care home staff. I think in some ways the sort of quotes and comments really speak for themselves. I think one of the most moving was about a lady wanting a leaflet of the event because she wanted to remember the day. We had one lady who hadn't left a care home for 2 years, and this was the first time she'd actually been out. So it's very much, yes, you may be surrounded by other people, but you can still be extremely lonely, which was what we really discovered. And we've had so much good feedback that we're running a smaller scale cafe every fortnight at the same venue. This one is purely for people living with dementia and their carers, and there's music, and that is going really well at the moment. So the next slide is some pictures of the event, and we'd just like to play you a little clip, a video clip. Hopefully that will work.
Brilliant.
So I think we'll just get back onto the presentation. But I think that will probably be one of my favourite events throughout. So our next project was the postcard from Middlesbrough project. We'll just wait for that slide to come on. This was a project, we launched this to celebrate Older Persons Day. It was co-designed by older people and an age-friendly steering group. The aim was to improve well-being through sharing memories and meaningful out activity. We wanted to start a conversation on pride of place and stories connected to the town. So we encouraged people to design their own unique postcard and write a cherished memory about Middlesbrough. And to make sure that the project was accessible, we actually posted creative packs out with stamped addressed envelopes, and we distributed postcards via a housebound library service. We engaged with care home residents, adults with learning difficulties, and also people living with dementia. And we sent over 300 packs out, and the completed postcards went on display at an event at the town hall, and they'll also go to local libraries eventually. We're looking at launching an online gallery as well. And so there you can see the next event, which is our Middlesbrough Our Stories event. This was again another co-designed event with our age-friendly ambassadors and age-friendly steering group. We booked the town hall with it being a central venue, and we invited over 30 organisations and community groups to host a stall or a workshop. Things like independent living, scam awareness, and of course, libraries ourselves. We also had RNID on hand, and they were doing hearing tests as well. There was also opportunity for people to record the memories of the town alongside an exhibition of postcards. So you can see a little exhibition there in the centre. And we also launched a survey to consult with older residents about shaping further activities for the project. And we were amazed to see over 250 people actually attended. So the next slide, again, as I mentioned, it's a multifaceted project. So there's lots of other strands. So we've got volunteering, which is age-friendly ambassadors project, age-friendly training, which is supporting people to age better, and we have some sensory drop-in sessions as well. So the age-friendly ambassadors, it's a new volunteer initiative launched by Public Health to empower older residents and ensure their voices are heard. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but we've recruited 7 volunteer ambassadors since the start of the project. So, and ambassadors are offered the opportunity to actually volunteer at our events as well. So next slide is our age-friendly training, I know, which Tessa alluded to earlier. So this free training looks at supporting people to age better, and it's open to all businesses, carers, community groups, and we're now including a volunteer who's going to co-deliver the training as well. So it's really that building confidence up. Also, our sensory support clinic. We know that sensory impairment increases the risk of loneliness and does have an impact on mental health. So we now have a monthly drop-in session which provides a safe space, access to interpreters and activities and advice, and some of the things that take place you can just see on the side of the screen there. And of course, we launched a library survey. So this will be the main driver in helping shape the Seniors Connected programme going forward. What do people want to see? And our next slide, we're going to carry on with the roadshows for older people, similar to those at the town hall across all our libraries and community hubs. It's been really evident that we need more events for care home residents. So what we are planning is a little bit like a sports day, a sports and wellbeing event, all with activities for older people in care homes. And we are looking at intergenerational projects as well, and an Age Proud campaign. And we're actually working with the Northern School of Art students who are in the town centre to produce an animation, interactive design for a campaign to get people in Middlesbrough thinking about social connections. So they were asked to think about the impact of loneliness and isolation, how to bring younger and older people together to do something that's mutually beneficial. So that's something that is in the works at the moment. So we've got lots of ideas and we're really looking forward to carrying on with the works. I think that's us.
Amazing. Thanks, Diane. So many things going on, and you can just see the energy in that video. It's lovely to see. So we'll be able to share that after the event today. And yeah, and co-design, again, it's like a really hot topic at the moment. Co-design and co-production, something that we'll be talking about the Libraries Connected annual seminar this year. So yeah, great that you picked that up. Thank you, Diane. So finally, we have John Hay from Burnley Libraries. He's going to give us an update on the Burnley's Better Together initiatives. Hi, John.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. Had some technical issues this morning with a flood in one of our buildings, so I was a little late getting on. Apologies. But I will just try to share my screen. Give me a second. There we are. So I hope you can all see that now. Is that all right?
That's good.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, as I say, I'm John from Burnley, and today I'm on the call. We've also got a young activator, you'll hear more about it in a minute, called Amber, and a project manager from Blaze Arts on the call, who are working with us on one part of our project in Burnley. So at the start, I mean, I won't dwell on this because a lot of us will have the same needs in the community, but we started by looking at the need and the difficulties that Burnley as an area faces and the challenges that it faces. And Burnley is among one of the most deprived areas in the UK, and the deprivation encompasses many dimensions, which can all exacerbate and lead to increased levels of loneliness and isolation. So we started by working with some of our internal partners, public health communities team, to identify people that we could target that might be most at risk of suffering from loneliness and isolation, and looking at ways that we could address this in the community. We decided to take a pronged approach, or a free-stranded approach. One was based in the library itself in terms of the library capacity, whereby we could review the provision that we currently offered and where there might be gaps, where we might be missing out certain members of our community, and how we could better hit those and attract people from those communities. The second was a project that had been started called the Clarets Collected, and what we wanted to do was add a volunteering element to that, a big volunteering element, so we've done that. And the third, and for me the most exciting part that we looked at, was we looked at how we could engage young people who are at risk of loneliness and isolation. And there's always this, we found in libraries, it's been one of the biggest challenges that we've had, is to engage those young people in our service. And I'm probably not best placed to work out what young people want from our service. So we reached out to some organisations, and luckily enough, Blaze stepped forward and agreed to work with us to help us firstly identify what it was that young people were after from the service and how we could better meet those needs. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Amber, who's one of the young activators from Blaze, who will talk you through their side of the project, and you will hear from me again at the end.
Hi everyone, I'm Amber. I might be slurring a bit in my speech today because I had a dental appointment where my mouth was numbed this morning. So it's been lovely trying to learn how to use my mouth again. And I'm thrilled to introduce you to what we're doing for the Know Your Neighbourhood Project, which is taking place at Burnley Central Library. And we're working very closely with John and his co-workers there. Next slide, please. As a creative activator, I'm working in a small team of a couple other young people supported by Katie and Helen from Blaze, and we're all very passionate about working towards youth engagement and youth voice when it comes to library engagement. We've been working on the project since around October, and we'd like to just thank you for this opportunity to come speak to you all and see some names to faces, especially. Our aim for the project as a whole is to connect with other young people and understand what they want for workshops or events at the library. And we'd like to make it a place where young people feel that they can speak about their suggestions and things that they want, so we know how to improve the library for them. Our project is geared towards a few key goals, such as socialisation and creative expression in young people to combat social isolation and loneliness. and to increase involvement from young people as a whole to the library service. Next slide, please. So as I've explained a bit, we'd like to get young people involved in a range of projects that are happening in the library. And we're doing this both by visiting in person and doing online interactions. We're then going to create an evaluation for the project as a whole, so we can share that to other libraries to understand from a young person's point of view the implications of a wide project like Know Your Neighbourhood. We use the Blaze values a lot as a team, and especially seeking diversity and disrupting assumptions, because as John mentioned before, Burnley is a very diverse community and it's quite a young population as well. So identifying the people that may not access the library before and getting their input is quite important to us. Next slide, please. So this is a quick mock-up of the project timeline that goes from left to right. It starts with October time, which was we all met and we started planning the project, into the consultation phase, which we're currently in. Next slide, please. So for the consultation, we're trying to get as much input as possible, and we're focusing at the moment on surveys and meetings with young people to get their thoughts. So I'm just finding where I am. So these are some of the questions, examples on the survey, such as if they've been to the library before and their possible reasons for not accessing the library, which goes into possible access arrangements. And also we'd like to find out from them if they'd be interested in coming to activities at the library, as well as the age range of the young people. We're mainly targeting 16+ people who may be experiencing loneliness, but we're also opening up to see if more younger or older people have something they'd like to contribute. Next slide, please. So here's our flyers, which we've done to make it so we get as much interaction as possible. We have quite a lot printed, which we're distributing around Burnley and also through social media advertising. And the QR codes on the 2 flyers will take you to the survey itself. And the one on the right is for an online consultation, which we're running shortly, so we can hear firsthand from the young people what they'd like. And it's also to increase engagement for people who may have access needs and may struggle to fill out an online form. Next slide, please. So thank you for listening, and if you have any questions at all in the chat, myself or Katie can quickly answer them.
Thank you, Amber. And it's back over to me now. And it's great, this project. I'm really excited for this part of the project in particular. We've had a lot of feedback from our sort of 0 to 19 skills team, our schools team and our public health teams that there is a growing level of loneliness and isolation within that age group within our community. So it's about how we best address that. And I think it'll be interesting to see if the data that young people can gather themselves is more useful than the data that we can gather as a service, because we don't always have that reach into the community that peer-to-peer support can get to. So that's an exciting strand of the project we're working on. I'll move on to the middle strand now. As we looked at not just Burnley Central Library, we're fortunate enough to have 5 libraries within the borough of Burnley, and they've all got different community groups, and there's different areas that people that access them. So what we've done is we've created a new role as a manager role to go in and look at the provision those libraries are providing and how we can better meet the needs of the community, and particularly people that may be becoming isolated and lonely. So we started off with some new activities at Burnley Central Library, and we're going to spread them out to the wider group. Some of the activities that have started are the Unveiling Narratives book group, which focuses on underrepresented authors and involves discussions of people so that people can feel that they're represented in the books that reading group is reading. We've gone through a list. We've had a couple of volunteers come in to deliver those sessions as well. So they've started off really popular, and I hope they continue. We've started a Burnley Library Luminaries group, which is a creative writing group. But it's not just creative writing. We can have poetry, we can have rap, any sort of writing that you want. It's not just focused on your traditional creative writing. That was very popular, and for some reason I ended up delivering it last week because we were short-staffed, and probably creativity isn't my strong suit, but they were a very, very welcoming group, and everybody's getting involved, and we've had some really, really good feedback. And last night we launched our Burnley Comics Club reading group, which is a group that focuses on a reading group for comics and manga. So I'm hoping to get people involved in those. Some of the activities that we've got coming up over the next few months. On one of our smaller libraries on Burnley campus, we have our East Lancashire Learning and Information team is already been set down there with our integration team, and it's the centre that helps to support new arrivals to the area, new arrivals to the country, and helps to find school places for children that have recently arrived in the country. So we're planning a large new to the area event where we will bring some of our key supporters in, some internal, external partners, and also a lot of our regular customers who are local to the area. And there'll be lots of opportunities for community cohesion, for mingling, for us learning about each other's cultures to try and increase that level of pride in Burnley, pride in place. So that we're looking to aiming for that for Refugee Week this year. So that's on there. We've got a women's health group at Burnley campus. It was a library I used to manage, and there was previously a women's health group going back before the pandemic started, which split up due to the COVID pandemic. And a lot of the feedback from those groups prior to the pandemic was that it really, really helped with people feeling isolated during the day when the kids were at school. The children at school, husbands at work, partners at work. They were predominantly a South Asian community, and there was lots of feelings of loneliness in that community, and they enjoyed having somewhere to go where they could engage in crafts, seated exercise, and have a general natter and catch up with people. So we're looking to relaunch that group. We've had a lot of interest in that group. So we're actually more worried that we'll have enough space to fit it in than actually getting people to fill it, which is not always the case in some of the groups that we start in our libraries. Moving on to Cold Clough and Pike Hill, they're community libraries, smaller community libraries, that the surrounding area is predominantly older residents, a lot living alone, going through those times of transition. So we're looking to start up some gardening groups. We've had a lot of requests up there that there's some grandparents that would like to be able to take their grandchildren out to groups and meet other grandparents as well. So we're looking at some grandparents and child Lego club, where they come along, they do some Lego, and they meet other grandparents. So we're really excited by that. And down at Burnley Library, we're looking at a couple of groups. One's a maternal journal, which is a nationwide initiative. And it was originally for new mums, but they've actually expanded it out to anybody who's been a mother. And they meet as a group. They have the first part of the session to talk about any concerns or any challenges that they're facing. And then they go into a creative art-based session whereby they create a piece of artwork. We're hoping that they'll be willing at the end of it to turn that into an exhibition that we can then show at the library, to try and further promote that group. And the same with the art therapy. There's a couple of practitioners that work in both areas. So we're looking to move those across. So that's the middle strand. And the final strand is called Clarets Collected. And this was a very interesting project for Burnley. Burnley has a very proud of its local football team. There's a very good connection and a very sense of place with the team. So we were fortunate enough just before Know Your Neighbourhood started to have a donation, a very, very large donation of Clarets Football Club memorabilia. And we were kind of looking at it going, we don't know what to do with it. We're hoping to turn it into an exhibition of some form. So our archives team were working on doing that. But when Know Your Neighbourhood came along, we found it would be the ideal opportunity to open up to volunteers from the town, to not just include the Clarets collection that we have, but also that local history offer that is on there. So working with the archives and our Lancashire Volunteer Partnership, we are bringing in volunteers to help catalogue the items that we've been donated and go through some of our local history collections that have stagnated over the last few, I want to say, years. And they're going to be cataloguing those with the goal of creating their own curated exhibitions at the end. So they will have control of the space that it's in. We've used some of the funds to create a nice volunteer area. I think Blaze have been using it, so Katie knows of the area, and Amber, they've been using that area to congregate where people can meet, talk about local history, what their memories of Burnley are with younger members from the community. We're looking at creating some intergenerational podcasts where we have some people talking about Burnley's experience in the top division going back to the 60s compared to Burnley's experience of being in the top division now, and those have been great. We've currently got 10 volunteers on roll on that part of the project at the moment, and we've got a few more in the pipeline. And it's great to see that some of those, well, it's split currently 50-50 between adult and young adult volunteers. So we're really excited that sort of intergenerational aspect is there. On every home match day, we have some of those volunteers in who deliver craft sessions for families. So they have that community aspect that's coming in, and those have been really, really popular. We've created a role to go along with that to manage those volunteers that's there as part of this funding, who is making sure that they have all the training, the equipment and facilities that they need. And of course, we're looking to balance those with the other strands as well, where they can interact. So we recently had a Clarets quiz for Christmas, whereby we reached out through our public health teams and asked people to come down to take part in a quiz, whereby they were randomly allocated to teams. So they had to socialise with people that they perhaps hadn't come with, or that they, so that if anybody came down on their own, they were worried about not finding a group, that didn't matter. They would be everybody would automatically be placed in a group. And we had some really, really positive feedback from that session, that people enjoyed taking part. It was a nice, easy event. The social side of it was great. And a lot of the people want us to run those events more regularly. We are holding in the summer some Age of Inspiration events where we've reached out to some of customers for our home library service, or some housebound customers, whereby we're going to bring them in for an event whereby it's almost an afternoon tea where they can meet other people. We're also looking to expand our volunteer offer through the Clarets Collected and our local history offer to include people who are housebound, so that they can have a volunteering role from home, but with a social aspect where we provide them with some means to engage in a monthly or every fortnight to communicate with other people who are working on the project. So it's like a hybrid working, like we're all getting used to at the moment, but we're trying to bring that into our volunteering as well. And assisting people as they need with accessing that technology to get on there. And I'm sure I'm rambling towards the end of my time now. So if anybody does have any questions, I'm happy for the slides to be shared. I've sent them over. But if you have any questions, please do feel free to get in contact. I'll pop my email in the chat, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I've got down in the agenda just a sentence that says wrap up, and I have no idea how to wrap up everything we've heard this morning, because there's some days, some occasions, I mean, we're always proud of libraries, aren't we, but some days you're prouder of libraries and proud of how Libraries Connected can bring these things together than others, and today was one of those times. So Nicola, love what you have to say about reading, and I think some of those examples you gave really resonated with the group. That and there's something about the act of reading in and of itself which really really matters in terms of loneliness and isolation. And I had a bit of a chat with colleagues after hearing from you previously, and that sense that actually that's what libraries at their core are about. So really pleased to hear about that work and the progress that they're making, that's making. Jools, I could listen to you forever. I could absolutely sit down and listen to you forever. I think we all agree. I think there are some presentations that some of the facts or some of the ways that the kind of sound bites from the presentation stay with us, and we find ourselves repeating at other meetings. Yours is going to be one of those. So I particularly some of the statistics. First of all, how incredibly prescient of you to be working on this in 2019, and recognise that this was an area that needed some thought before all of that happened. So incredible. The statistics. I think there's been some comments in the comment section about those statistics. I think particularly profoundly that loneliness curtailing lifespan by 26%. I mean, what are we here to do if not to extend quality of life and close that opportunity gap? So really, really important statistics. The bit that nearly made me cry, the last Happy Christmas, first Happy New Year. I think again that resonates with those of us who have spent time on the front line and really get to know those I nearly said customers then. I'm not going to say customers. Those people who use our services and rely on them. And the other bit that I really, really took home about that was the profound importance of the ordinary. And sometimes, and I know we all get asked to justify our existence all the time, and explain what we do and what we can do differently. But actually, the ordinary act of visiting a library has profound importance. And I really loved how you were able to bring sight to that. Kerry, soldiering on with that cold. There's something for me about resilience, and Kerry, Diane, and John and Amber. So it embodies, first of all, personal resilience of colleagues across the sector, dealing with colds, dealing with floods, dealing with dental appointments, and still managing to give amazing presentations to a huge audience. So thank you for that. The other bits that I took from the case studies, and thank you to Kerry, Diane, John and Amber. So there was something about a thread that ran through all of them about understanding. So and by that I mean understanding who we mean when we talk about loneliness. And I think that was something that was really important to the board at the start and when we were evaluating the bid. So we had some indicators from DCMS that said these groups are more likely to be lonely than others. But the bit that you've all demonstrated is that you've taken that, but you've really taken steps to understand the people in your communities and the particular circumstances they find themselves in, and work on actually what loneliness means in your individual communities. And also something about the barriers to joining in, and that might be different for different people. It might be different in different places. There may be different reasons. So it's really good to see that coming through. A bit of a thread about recruitment and resourcing this, and I think the bit that I just wanted to comment on was how this amazing, wonderful thing that everybody's doing on this call isn't happening in a bubble. It's happening in the context of extraordinary pressure on the sector. We know how hard it is just to keep our libraries going. We've got recruitment issues, we've got sickness issues, we've being dragged into all different things. So absolutely hear the point about the ambition of wanting to get somebody in and in post, and then actually the time it takes just to do that, or that person goes and gets a new job and then you have to start again. So I think there's something about recognizing this as a part of a wider system, and how profoundly important this work is, and how amazing it is that it's keeping going. Co-design. So another thing that ran really clearly through the project was that you're working with communities, not doing to them. And I think that came out in a number of the case studies. So again, really lovely to see those, the residents in bloom and the work there. Kerry, you've completely sold Cranach Chase to me, and John and Amber, the kind of the activator approach and the work you're doing in Burnley, but all of those exemplify a kind of co-design working with communities. Range, so the types of different people that these projects are reaching, there's a huge, really, really wide audience and a range of different approaches. And then finally, that continuous learning. So all of you were talking about the things you've learned from the projects and what you might adapt, how you might change. And I think there's something for us about recognizing that these projects and the way we approach loneliness and isolation more broadly needs to be flexible, it needs to be adaptive, and it needs to work with changing circumstances and changing people. So I think I've taken all of those things away from this morning, and also taken away 2 hours being really inspired and going back to my day job thinking, right, actually we do make a difference. So thank you. Tess and Emma, was there anything else you wanted to add before I close and give everybody a minute back? In that case, I want to thank again all our speakers. I think we'll give a round of applause, either a visual one or with our team. So thank you all for standing up. It's really, really hard to stand up in front of a screen of faces and talk with the passion that you've talked this morning. I also want to say a very special thank you to the Libraries Connected team. So behind the scenes, keeping all of this going. So Emma and Tess on the call today, James in the background, and all the other people that are just making sure this project works, that are monitoring it, making sure you get your money when you need it, all of the basics like that, but also giving it some drive and direction. And also thank you for all of you, because you are all, as I said at the start, advocates for how libraries can support our communities to be more connected and less lonely. So thank you for you to listening. I think that's it. Let's go and get a cup of tea before our next meeting. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.